morning, everyone. This is Rich Johnson. I want to welcome all 90 people that signed up for this morning. There's 90 people out there, and I can't see a one of you. Today we're going to talk about the OSHA 300, or the OSHA record-keeping rules. And for this seminar, I'm going to reference a lot the 29 CFR Part 1904, which is actual rules and regulations. And rather than trying to interpret them, I would really prefer being able to point you to the right one. You can read them, and then there's also explanations that OSHA has put in there for a lot of these things. That's what we get directly into the OSHA mind for some of these things, or most of them, I would say. I'll link you to this. I'll give you this link right now, and I believe it is active, isn't it? Oh, I guess it's not. I'm sorry. This is the OSHA link to the record-keeping tab. They changed it on me, and I had to go searching for it. But this is the one that you go into, and it's got all the training materials. It's got a slideshow. It's got the 300, 300A, and the 301 all together on the same web page. And you can use all the resources that are there. I would, again, reference you to this one, to something that you want to get to using. Begin with Subpart B, 1904, is the rules and regulations related to record keeping. On there, the first three parts, you see them listed here. There is the small employer exemption, partial exemption. There's industry exemptions, and there's also how to keep records for other federal agencies. We won't spend much time in those areas. I will go back, though, and reference a size exemption. If a company has 10 or less employees throughout the entire calendar year, you do not have to keep a 300, nor do you have to respond to a Bureau of Labor statistic that they send out. It's a random survey. However, if at any time you go over the 10 and you had an 11, and these are full-time equivalents, I will say, not part-time or made you 11. It's 11 full-time equivalents. At any point in a year, you are required to keep an OSHA 300 log. There are OSHA statistic is that they'll tell you that 20% of the industries in the country are the only ones that have to keep record, 80% don't. It's a little confusing, but when you consider all industries such as agriculture, construction, you can see them here. These are all covered. The service sectors, now retail is obvious. Service sectors might be things like doctors' offices or dentists, medical facilities. These are partially exempt, and you need to go to within the 1904 rule and regulations. If you look at Appendix A to Subpart B, we'll give you the list of who are exempt. Real estate, for instance, sales. Can tend to be exempt. So I'm not going to quote any of them specifically, other than tell you that there are some exemptions out there, and you should be aware of what those are. However, looking at the list of people that are out there, of you 90, I would say none of you are exempt. That's a fair enough statement, I think I can say. Now, I have tried to simplify this over the years, and if you were to call me, for instance, on the phone and say, Rich, and feel free to do this, and I also have Rick Barton, who's now on our staff, too. You could call Rick as well. And is this OSHA recordable? What I give you is my rule of thumb, and it's two questions, simply. Did employee have to seek work or leave work to seek medical treatment? If so, then it's likely OSHA recordable. But then there's a second question. Was medical treatment beyond first aid given? If so, then it's OSHA recordable. Now, very simplified, and again, it's just a place to start, but I'll give you honestly, OSHA has gone through and developed a 5-step process. So I only give you 2. We'll go 5 steps to give you more detail on how this is supposed to work. So here they are. I'll go through each one specifically and give you some examples and explanations and questions so you can understand the process. Call it a fault tree or a decision tree, but there's 5 points to it. Step 1. Did the employee experience an illness or an injury? Now, illnesses are a little bit different. Only the point in time in which an illness actually is diagnosed may be years. So you know when the actual occurrence occurred. but generally we try to refer to those as illnesses, injuries together. And here OSHA has given its definition. It's 1804.46. You can read it specifically for yourself. I think these is simply an abnormal condition or disorder. So that be injury or illness. You can read. I don't like to read slides, but I'll give you this one here that you can start reading it yourself as far as the definition goes. Now, here's a scenario. So, a worker reports to the nurse's station a complaint of painful wrists. The employee is given 2 Advils and is returned to the job. Is this OSHA recordable? Or is it? If it is, then you go to the next step. Now, so the answer, of course, as you can see down here, it says go to the next step. In other words, evidence that this may be OSHA recordable, that you need to go through the rest steps, the 5 steps, to determine if it is OSHA recordable. It may not be OSHA recordable. And saying it may not be is because the type of treatment that was given to the complaint was first aid. However, in itself, this is a musculoskeletal complaint, musculoskeletal disorders. This is the ergonomic things, and the full wrists may or may not be related to work, but at the same time, they could be. So that's why they take you on to the next step. It's not always that simple. Here's an scenario. The chlorine leak at XYZ. Established 2 employees are rushed to the hospital. They are told to stay home the next day as a precautionary measure. Is it recordable or not? Here again, we have a similar situation. These are the illness. This is why illness becomes a little difficult to determine. In this case, the answer is ethical. It depends. We need to ask more questions. And is if there were signs or symptoms exhibited from a chlorine gas leak, you'd have to go on and say, yeah, we need more information. Was there treatment given? If there were symptoms, I would say there was probably treatment given. If there were no symptoms, they got to see what else came out of it. What happened when they stayed at the hospital? They were rushed to the hospital and then told to stay home. In other words, they didn't stay in the hospital. They were just told to stay home. So it looks on first blush to be not a serious situation, but can't really dismiss it as a not recordable. It could be developing into something much larger. So then step 2, I went backwards. Oh, I guess. Step 2 is the injury work-related or is work-related? So that's got to go back to the first 2 first and say, is there something in the job that caused this to happen? The term of work-related, many people confuse workers' comp with OSHA 300. Very similar. There's some differences. Usually, you can take a lot of the definitions within workers' comp and relate them back to the OSHA record keeping. This is one of those cases where you can do that. Work-relatedness, as defined by 1904.5, is similar to the workers' comp definition. In other words, was illness or injury that occurred or was reported to you of something that occurred in the work environment? Was it an event or an exposure that occurred in the work environment? The person was on payroll doing their job, whatever. That's what's referred to as work-relatedness. It was not and there also the work environment too is another part of that. Was the person at work doing this, or were they doing something that was similar to what they do, but they were doing it as a volunteer or off the work environment? Those are other things that are related to work-relatedness. But again, if you're familiar with the workers' comp definition on this one, I certainly encourage you to use that one as well. To go so far as to define what the work environment is. And that it could be any number of places where the person is doing something that is a condition of their employment. What they are to do, and if they're doing it as part of their work job, daily work hours or whatever, then it could be within the work environment. But it's important to note that not all work environments are related to a physical location. It could have, the OSHA refers to this as their bubble of work environment. I'm quoting OSHA on this one. If they leave the work establishment and are, for instance, salesman would be a good example. They're out of the typical work environment, the manufacturing facility, they carry their work environment with them in the car. That is where they do their work, talking on the phone while they're driving. Of course, that's another issue altogether. But is it with them? Are they carrying that bubble with them? At this point, another compounding factor, it's called persisting conditions or aggravation. Again, this is very similar to the workers' comp rule. Here. So again, if you're familiar with that rule, apply it as well for significant aggravation. She goes so far as to say that a significant aggravation is worsening condition and their work environment makes that injury or illness, it aggravates it or brings it on. This goes so far as to, let me read this a little bit closer, result in any of the following. I refer back to I'm getting confused myself on how to explain this one. I would say go back to the workers' comp rule and simply say, did they have something beforehand that is still existing? It didn't treat it and had gone away and it comes back again from something else. A doctor or medical professional will have to determine if the condition was pre-existing and the work just aggravated. It's a different way of recording it. It's not a new case is what we're going with this. Exceptions. As with all rules and regulations, there are usually exceptions, and these are important to know. In this case, 1904.5 defines what those exemptions are. Some examples that are given here, for instance, if a grocery store employee is clocked off, hasn't left the work site yet, and doing some shopping before going home, and trip and fall, is that work-related? And, of course, the definition would be no, because they're off the clock. Even though they're still in their workplace and are doing what they normally do. In this case, they're shopping for themselves. That is not work-related. Another would be someone that is a diabetic, and they must be given insulin on a daily basis. A person forgets to do that, and they have a diabetic situation. They go into a diabetic coma or whatever. That's not work-related because there's nothing in the work environment that caused that diabetes nor caused the diabetic incident. It's related to the individual's need to take care of their own condition. The situation might be if there is, well, let's say an employee is giving blood or is playing ball. It's a voluntary participation in a wellness or fitness program, then it's not work-related. Now, this gets a little funky. I would refer to our claims department for sure on this one, Pam or Susan, because if you have a wellness center on your workplace and in any way or form, and I'm being very broad here, give the employee the perception that participation is not voluntary. Now comes possibly work-related. If you're having a picnic and everybody is playing, a bunch of people are playing baseball and someone slips and falls and blows out a knee, that's a company event. Could become, and I'm being broad here, could become a work-related situation. So be careful with some of these things. Employee burns his lip on a cup of coffee or chokes on a sandwich while working. Because it's consumption. So an example would be a salesman pulls into McDonald's, he's on his work hours, he's driving from point A to point B, it's lunchtime, he pulls in for a cup of coffee, he spills a cup of coffee on his leg. Is that work-related? Well, your first assumption might be, well, it could be, but no, it says right here, it's OSHA is concerned. That's a consumption of food or drink, and it is not work-related. Some exceptions or exemptions. Employee using a sewing machine to make tent. Let's say the person's job is they work on a sewing machine all day, or that's their job. So they're volunteering their time to make tents for Girl Scouts. I don't know. They're pretty cheap to buy. The shift ended. They're off the clock, but they're still sitting at their workstation and they're sewing. That's not work-related because that's a personal task outside of assigned hours. This brings in the question of hours, when they're on the clock or when they're off the clock, when their job duties end or when they begin. Again, those on the road or external work environments can become difficult to determine based upon when the incident actually occurs. Here's another one. An employee has a negative reaction to asthma, and they take an inhaler for allergy situation. At work, they take a puff on the inhaler and they have an allergic reaction. Is that work related? Or they get masks. They use masks and they get it in their eye, and it causes them to hurt themselves. Is that work related? Like, these are self-medication. These are all non-work related conditions. So you got to be really, personal grooming would be another one. Is suicide work related? It would not be, because it's self-inflicted. Questions that become, some of these tasks or decisions become very funky because you really dig into what's going on here and know what the exceptions are. Motor accidents. Employee is injured in a motor vehicle accident going or leaving work at the end of the shift or on a personal errand is work-related. And no, it's not work-related. However, in the coming and going rule, which I'll refer to in a minute, if they slip in the parking lot or involved in a car wreck during business hours, now it's work-related. Flu and colds are not work-related. These are common illnesses. Mental illness is not work-related, though I suspect that may be changing. There's some new rules forefront that may affect the mental illness definition, but that's just me predicting. Injury and illness thing. If the employee is on travel status and it is work-related, then anything that happens during that activity, this is that bubble of work environment, it would be related to work. It would be work-related. However, here we go again, when an employee checks into a hotel or motel, he or she has established a home away from home. The hotel room becomes their home. So if they slip and fall in the hotel shower, even though they're on the road, it's not work-related. They're in their home environment. Employees on a conference, they're out of the office, they've gone to and the company's paying for that conference. Well, decided to take a side trip on one afternoon to do some sightseeing while on this company-paid seminar. That's work-related because it's not related to their work. That side trip is not. It really becomes one of digging into getting more information so you can make a judgment on this. Working out of home, working remote, this is something that is occurring more and more. And sadly, if you consider allowing employees to work at home because you think you can avoid some of the work-relatedness, it doesn't work that way. If the job description tells them what they're supposed to do while they're at home and they are on the computer sitting in their home office doing some work and they incur an injury or whatever, that is considered to be work-related. If they are in their general home environment, out at a little office becomes an office into itself. The minute they step away from that office, step out of that room, and go to get a drink of water or get something to eat so they can go and sit back and do some more work, that is not considered part of their office. That is not related. For instance, here's an example of an employee who is working at home to answer a phone call, a work-related phone call, and he trips over his dog. Breaks. Now, is it work-related? No, he was not. He was part of his home environment. The dog is not work-related. It's not a hazard. It's part of the work environment. So there you have to figure out how to do this. There's an interesting document out there, and I have taken a look at it. I'll give you a reference to it. If it's something you would like direction on how to get it so you can read it, just give me a call or drop Rick or I an email, and I'll give you the document. But it's the OSHA Directive CPL 2.0.125, which gives guidance on OSHA's policy for employees who work at home. OSHA does not conduct inspections in home offices, but it does tell you, gives you OSHA's opinion of what is or is not a related situation in a home office. Here's a scenario. It gives blood at a voluntary blood drive, asks it out. OSHA recordable? Generally not OSHA recordable. There is an exception though. If it's part of an activity that is somehow their job activity, then it might be. There again, we're back to that physical, that wellness program or whatever. The employer has to be very careful on how they define what is voluntary and what is expected. In this case, it would not be OSHA recordable. There's an ankle coming and going from the parking lot. Is this OSHA recordable? Missing and going rule. They're in the parking lot. They slip and fall. They're going to work. In this case, with workers' comp, it's clearly a workers' comp case. With OSHA, are considered to be our work environment. However, a vehicle situation is not if it's during the commute. Scenario B, employee slips and falls in the hallway at work, breaks an arm while working on a daughter's science project on Saturday, which is normally the employee's day off. Recordable? Nope, because voluntary, they're off their clock, they're off their, they're not, it's not part of their assignment to be doing this. Not OSHA recordable. Is this injury or illness a new case, or is it an aggravation of a pre-existing one? And here to that situation of considering whether it is a new case or whether it is an aggravation. And this is really based upon, I can simplify this one really, you're also going to need to have some kind of medical involvement. If a doctor can diagnose that this is something, for instance, if it was a carpal tunnel, they were treated for it, and the doctor says they returned to full D. Generally, you could say, no, this is not an aggravation, except with musculoskeletals, and I used a bad example, carpal tunnel. Never goes away. Once you hit, it's going to keep coming back. Musculoskeletals tend to be a re-aggravation unless it's a different joint occurs. But a broken leg and you break it again, same leg, that's not an aggravation, that's a new case unto itself. It's going to be up to a doctor to determine whether or not it is an aggravation or a new situation. And right here, it's a medical opinion, and medical opinion is that it's the case is resolved and it happens again. That's not a re-aggravation. That is a new case. If it's in this case, you're talking asthma or rashes, illnesses can tend to be, in many cases, an aggravation. You use a reference here, things like silicosis, tuberculosis, and most diseases will generally be, unless a doctor can determine, again, that it's gone away, it will become a chronic situation. Here, an employee sprains his wrist to work, receives support, medical, prescription medication, light duty. There's some key words in this description. 2 weeks ago, the employee was back to their job completely recovered. 5 weeks post-injury, the employee is complaining of nerve pain in the same wrist after moving boxes. And then here we're talking the musculoskeletal again. Now you can see in the first description, medication, support, light duty, these are all things that say this was a recordable case to begin with. So do we have here, is this a re-aggravation or is it something new and different? Well, let's go on. And why? Because if the doctor said they were completely recovered, see how that's highlighted? If the doctor says it was completely recovered, this would not be a aggravation. This would be a new case. However, with these musculoskeletal ones, this interpretation there medically, they're beginning to understand that it's really not, it's a continuous case that goes on and on. But don't make that decision yourself. itself. Leave it up to the doctor. Computer covered. Employee sprains his wrist, receives support, prescription medication, and light duty. Same description. Weeks ago, the employee was back to a normal job, but continued to take prescription medication. Now, 5 weeks after the injury, complains of pain in the same wrist. Key phrase here. Continues to take prescription medication. Still under treatment. Has not fully released by the doctor. This is an aggravation. Not case. Fracture at work. 6 months it bothers him. He's placed on late duty for a day or two. Is this a new case or not a new case? Again, it depends. With a broken bone, leaving a bone in the same place are very, very small because it becomes very strong at that point. Can you break the leg in the same place, or in the same bone farther down? Sure. But in cases, it's a new case because the bone has completely healed and there's no evidence of break. Therefore, there's something that's going on. Well, why? And again, the slide says it depends. One employee completely recovered. If not, stop. Okay, if it says he's fully healed, it's not. It's a new case. Is there an event or exposure in the work environment that's new and different? In that case, it would be a new case. So again, so many questions and answers that you have to determine as far as making that determination. 4. Does injury or illness meet the general criteria application to specific cases? What in this slide is given you, it's 1904.7. They basically tell you what is considered to be an injury or illness that is recordable, or a recordable injury or illness. I'm right here. The one I point out to you is the one on medical treatment beyond first aid. That he said that's an exception. If medical treatment is defined or confined to first aid, then it doesn't fit these criteria. But keep this slide available to you at all times. This is something that will help really simplifies the process. If it's one of these things, OSHA recordable. They do go a little bit further, though, and explain some of these. Recorded days away from work is one that always gets people confused because workers' comp, for instance, has a 3-day grace period before it becomes compensable under workers' comp. There is no such rule with the OSHA recordables, record keeping, and that's where a lot of people get confused. I don't have to record anything if he's back to work the next day. This is one day. Let's say they hurt themselves at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the illness, they lose 1 day the next day before they come back. That's OSHA recordable because they've lost today. Now the question here becomes, choose not to come back to work, or were they ordered by a doctor not to come back to work? If choose not to come back to work, that's a lost day. If the doctor tells them not to take a day off, now again, it becomes a recordable day because there's a doctor involved with it. But day of injury does not get counted. Excuse me. And to the 300 log, which we'll go to in a minute, you check a box that a lost day occurred, and then you also put the number of days that were actually lost as part of that. Include the day that it occurred. 19.7B3. Page here. Slide on just a second. Here we go. Couples here. No issue with calendar days. These are calendar days. It's not weekends. If a person works Monday through Friday, Saturday and Sunday are not considered recordable. If they work on Saturday and Sunday, those are recordable. There is a cap on recordable days at 180 days. Days away are restricted. Keep that in mind. You never have to go over 180 days. You can stop counting the days if the employee leaves the company. So if they're hurt and they're given 3 months off, whatever, and they leave after a month and a half, you only have to record that month and a half that they were actually on the payroll. and based upon medical opinion. If it says it's not, they can't come back to work, you have to honor that. Example that one of our other clients brought to me a day or two ago, and I bounced this one off of Rick Barton here. Here's the example. An employee gets 2 days off from work for injury. But those days at work, the individual goes to fulfill days of National Guard duty. Now, were these 2 days recordable as days off or not? Well, some of my opinions here. Whether or not, for instance, were these work days? The question is, why were the 2 days given off? Was it medical treatment? Was it an injury? So that's the first question. You just said, well, you know, whatever, take 2 days off. Go back to see if there was an actual injury. The second one, who was paying for those 2 days of work? National Guardsmen usually get paid for the time that they go to work or that they fulfill their guard duties. If the employee was off the payroll for the employer, but the payroll for the National Guard, that's question you could ask. Who those lost days? In my opinion on this one, the key would be, was he not paid by the employer during those 2 days? Was he off work? Again, that's an opinion. You could get many legal opinions. It's a tricky question. I'm going to reference here a little bit, though. It's just, again, one of my own opinions. If you make a mistake, record something or don't record something, OSHA is going to come down and fine you for doing that at that point, just for not doing it. It's an objective decision that you have to make. Do I or don't I? If in your opinion it's not recordable, then don't record it. What happens where you will get in trouble or where something might come up if OSHA does an inspection for some other reason and do a records check and they look at your OSHA log and they may go so far, they're not going to see anything on the log itself, but let's say they go back and look at your workers' comp first incident, for whatever reason, they're doing a thorough wall-to-wall investigation, and OSHA can do this, and see this particular situation where the employee was given 2 days off, but don't see it on the log. Ask you, why did you put these 2 days down? And give a justifiable answer to them. It's accepted or not, and again, it's an opinion on your part. There's really no hard and fast rule in something like this. You're not going to get fined generally. You may say, well, we'll issue you a serious citation and ask you to put that number on there. Then you're going to put the number on there. If they don't see it, nothing's going to happen. And why record something if you don't have to or if there's a decision? My error to your advantage. That's the way this system works. When good on it, or good, it's not really clear. Error to your advantage. Probably in trouble for that one. 1904.7b4 defines what are restricted work cases. Where there's restricted duty or job transfer are not considered law days. They're considered restricted duty or job transfer. It's a separate column. Again, the day that the restriction occurs does not count. It's the next day. These exist if the employee is able to do the things they normally do. For instance, let's say if they can't work a full 8-hour shift, they can only work 4 hours. Well, those 4 hours of not being able to work are considered work restricted. Now, it would not really be a day off. It would be restricted work because they're working half day, and the other half day is restricted work. They can work the full shift, but they can't perform all of their routine tasks. It's also considered restricted work. We're getting here the idea of return to work, put them back to work. It's something that that does not aggravate the existing situation or doesn't allow it to heal, but they're able to still earn their full salary and they're able to work. It's good for you on a workers' comp cost side, and it's also good for them because people who work faster, sit home during the day, has been shown to be not productive in terms of healing properly. hour in 1904.7b4 was restricted work, and here again they define it. In this case, restricted work is not. These are some of the exceptions, and now we're getting into those musculoskeletal things. Sore wrists. Male opinion determines they're able to work fully. So let me have sore wrists. You send the doctor looks at it and says, take some aspirin, some ibuprofen, whatever, but go back to work. You should be okay. Is it recordable? And recordable, would you call it restricted work? You, in my opinion, you neither, because what did they get? They got over-the-counter aspirin, Tylenol, whatever, until go back to work. So there's really nothing there. But it's a case where you want to keep a really close eye on this individual, because this is something that's going to blow up on you. Then those musculoskeletal things become very, very expensive if not addressed correctly. If the employer assigns work restrictions for venting, and that's what I'm going at, that item number 3, the third one. If this person is getting sore wrists from that job, but this complaint results in a non-recordable, you need to go back and say, we need to move you to a different job because this is causing you some pain and agony that might become worse later. That's not a work restriction that's recordable. That's you being preventative, proactive, and a good thing to do. That's why you have to keep a real close eye on these musculoskeletals early on, because there's a lot of strength that goes into prevention to begin with. Jobber, if the employee to something else because of that injury, that's a job transfer. That has its own box. This is the one that gets a lot of people. I'm getting close to time here, so I got to speed up a little bit. But medical treatment is first aid. What a diagnostic treatment. If someone goes in and they say they hurt their foot and the doctor does an X-ray but then releases them, X-ray is diagnostic. So it's not considered medical treatment. It's only when the doctor or physical therapist or chiropractor or whatever prescribes some form of medical treatment or does something. If they shot a cut and put a Band-Aid on it, that's first aid. If they put a stitch in it, it now becomes recordable. And where you need your knowledge of what is or is not a first aid treatment versus medical treatment helps a lot. I put it here to myself, one shot, for instance. Is that treatment? Well, people would say yes, but it's also diagnostic. In a doctor's opinion, a cortisone diagnostic is that if they give you the cortisone shot in the joint and the pain goes away, that's actually where the injury is. If you put a cortisone shot someplace else and the pain doesn't go away, that's not the injury. So it can be diagnostic. These can be very tricky in terms of what the medical doctor thinks and what the general public thinks on some of these. Immunization, non-prescription medication, test shots. That's not a treatment. That's prevention. Clean flushing, steroids, hot-cold therapy, non-rigid. That's a non-splint kind of thing. Setting up a sprained ankle, medical treatment. It's not rigid. It says right there, non-rigid. So in your opinion, we're not going to call it treatment because it's non-rigid. OSHA argue with you, but it's your opinion. Example, people have a carbon monoxide poisoning. They're sent to the hospital and the doctor gives them oxygen, which is the treatment. That's first aid. That's the treatment for carbon monoxide poisoning. They give them supplemental oxygen. Again, you need to know what is or is not first aid. Here are a list of some of the things that are considered first aid. I won't spend time on these. Anything that loss of consciousness, that is always going to be medical recordable. Remember that slide I showed you before that had all the things on it? They find by regulation what is or is not OSHA recordable or what is an injury or illness. That's what this is coming from. Illness issues, totally different situation. The date and time when an illness begins, how to diagnose. For instance, asbestosis or mesothelioma. These are 20 to 30 years before they actually show up. So all you can do with the health situations is record the day that the doctor actually diagnoses that they have this particular situation. Don't get to the bloodborne pathogen one. If someone is exposed to blood, that's only recordable if their job requires them to be exposed to blood or body fluids. It goes into the bloodborne pathogen standard. It's not first aid. It's not a random exposure. Don't record that as a bloodborne exposure. As defined by job description, if they're required to respond, then it's a job exposure. Medical surveillance. This slideshow, by the way, is available to you. All you have to do is ask Suzanne will send it to you. Oh, she'll send it to you automatically. Here, becomes an issue, becomes recordable, not at the first identification of a hearing loss, but they go back for reevaluation, and that temporary threshold shift becomes a standard threshold shift. That's the second item. When the loss reoccurs or stays, it does not go away. However, it's only recordable when there is a 25 decibel loss above the baseline. However, dB loss, even though it's permanent, is not OSHA recordable until it's a 25 dB loss. I'll explain that here to you. Now, the 300 log, the 300A, 301, these are all available on that website. This is a definition of what they are. This is the OSHA 300 log. Notice you put the employee names on here. Do not post the OSHA 300 log. With the names on there, that is private information. You're required to post something. It's not the 300. It's the 300A. I'm sorry, this is the 301. That's an optional form that you can, that's your injury and illness report, if you want to use that. But here's 300A. This is what you post. Contractor that you're working for asks you to submit this document, or they want to know what your OSHA 300 log was for last year. You send them the 300A. If they want the 300, don't send it. They're not allowed to request that form. There's also this document which you can use to calculate your injury or illness rates. This is the DART rate or the OSHA recordable. There's good information as far as comparing yourself to the national average. To do that, give me a call or Rick or I a call. We can show you how to do it. The important, it's not complicated. The important thing is to know that what your NAICS number is, not your SIC code. That's overused. NAICS code. And again, give us a call. Avoid temptation to record just to be safe. Not with the 300 log, because it's going to get you in the end. See the data? The BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, sees it only if you're asked to send in a complete survey from them. That is mandatory. You can't throw it away. Then I got to hear that can trigger an OSHA high hazard letter. That is no longer being done. OSHA doesn't do that anymore. If you've ever got one of those OSHA nastygrams, they're not doing it anymore. It's out of the budget, so they're not doing it, so don't worry about it. We'll only see these numbers if they come and do an OSHA inspection, and they'll take a look at it. In this case, the compliance officer will request the data for 3 years, even though you're required to keep it for 5 years. Backlight here. You only get it in 3 years. Here's where you can calculate your DART and OSHA recordable and compare it to the national average. That's always only 3 years behind, though, so be careful there. And here's that website for doing how to do it. It's 3 years old data. You must record it within 7 calendar days of workers' comp says you have to report it as soon as it occurs. With OSHA, you've got 7 days to report it. In case, I'm going to skip over some of these. Lack of time here. You've got multiple establishments. Each work site needs to have its own OSHA 300 log. That's not one general one for the whole company. Each work site where there's is working need to keep their own OSHA 300 log. The key one here is if you supervise temporary employees, even though you're not paying them, if you supervise them, they're part of your OSHA log. The year need to review the OSHA 300 log and then certify it. There's a signature placed on the bottom of the 300 log, which requires it to happen. Once you have that signed, then you have to post it from May 1st to April 30th. and you're not posting the 300, you're posting the 308. Back to here real quick. It's new for 2015. This is something you really need to keep a close eye on. It used to be you only had to recall OSHA if you had a fatality or an incident involving 3 or more hospitalizations. Now, as of 2015, you need to report to OSHA any amputation, loss of eye, or overnight hospitalization within 4 hours. If an employee, what's amputation? It's as small as losing a tooth. If an employee loses a tooth, OSHA considers that an amputation. If they lose the tip of their finger, that's amputation. If they get to the hospital and they're released, that's hospitalization. If they're admitted and spend an overnight, that's hospitalization. You have to call OSHA. Hospitals have been told that they have to call OSHA if an amputation, loss of eye, or overnight hospitalization. So even if you forget to do it or don't do it, OSHA will go up, and you get fined if you don't do it in 24 hours. An excellent fact sheet that you can go to find, if you've got a specific question, this website, you can type in the question, and OSHA will give you a response back as to how OSHA would respond to it or consider it. I found this while researching for this presentation. I thought this was a nice little interactive. OSHA's website is one of the best government websites I've ever seen. It's really good.
Or anybody chimes in here with a question, I received a lot of questions throughout this presentation about, are we going to get the PowerPoint? Is PowerPoint going to be available to us? Is there going to be recording? Yes. Every person who signs up for our webinars will receive an email coming from me that will link to the webinar and also the PowerPoint presentation. So it's assured that things that we had to fly through due to time, you will have to go back through and look at yourself. Get a PowerPoint. Yeah. Okay, has a question, go ahead and chime in.
Questions anybody has if they were unable to answer or they answered. One question here. A volunteer first aid team that is exposed to bloodborne illness is recordable. And the key you got there is voluntary. No, it's not OSHA recordable on bloodborne pathogen law. Because it's here. Voluntary response. His number to contact OSHA with last site contact. Yeah, you can type in the OSHA website is www.osha.gov. Go on that web page. That's the first prefix of both those links that I typed in there. And they will give you, there's a contact list on there where you can call 800, the 800 number. You can call if you're in Madison or Milwaukee or Appleton or you can call the regional offices and ask a question. They're happy to help. It does trigger, you don't have to tell them who you are. It does trigger, doesn't trigger an inspection, but they will help you. There's also the OSHA consultation program. They can help. Plenty of help out there. But if the 100 number, I don't have it here in front of me. Wait a minute, I do too. Hold on. 1-800 OSHA S-H-A. That's the enroll call-in number. Thanks. 1-800-321-OSHA. Employee coming to work, parks in the parking lot, and slips on the ice in the parking lot. Yes, that's OSHA recordable because they're going to work. That's the coming and going rule. It's also workers' comp claim as an injury. Yeah, if they're in the employee parking lot, coming or going to work and slip, yes. 24-hour shift. Yeah, if they're on a work shift as part of their job assignment and they get injured, yeah, it's workers' comp. Like a salesman, for instance. The exception to that would be if they are sleeping or they rent a room or whatever. That room becomes their home environment. Remember that bubble of work environment? You make that question. Are they or are they not doing their work at that point in time? Even though they're on the clock for 24 hours, they're not working 24 hours. There's got to be a sleep time. Rich, do an outside inspection device on
OSHA.
Yes, we're available. Rick and I both are available. All you need to do is give us a call and tell us what you're looking at. We'll set something up for you. There's two of us that can do it, so we're here. They've injured on Friday and had vacation the following week. This week was planned in advance. Do we record the vacation days as days away from work, even if the individual had no restrictions? Give them time off. If they're injured, but it was minor enough that they were not given time off, then no, it's not recordable as a lost day. It may be recordable as a OSHA recordable if there's medical treatment given, but not be recordable as a lost time recordable. Vacation days, that question, where are you going? Are you on the clock or not? If you're not on the clock, as was lost time, then you have to take it when you're on the clock. Does that make sense? I'm repeating myself here. It gets really complicated. When in doubt, err on your advantage. Slip and fall rules
in the parking lot.
In the parking lot, same question. Coming or going, if they're parking in the parking lot, get out of the car to walk into the office or the place and slip and fall, it's OSHA recordable. It's also workers' comp.
Recordable.
Muscle strains are recordable when the doctor can, that's the musculoskeletal conundrum. Muscle injuries, strains, sprains, all those kind of things are 100% subjective. In other words, there's no diagnostic tool that exists that a doctor can use to determine if there truly is an injury present. It's 100% based upon the patient's input. Doc, ankle hurts here. Doctor will then say, well, it's a sprain or a sprain, it's one or the other. Is there treatment given? Well, at the point that the doctor sends them home with, say, go get ibuprofen or whatever, it's based upon the treatment given. If they're given a prescription pain medication, muscle relaxants, whatever, now it becomes OSHA recordable. It's based upon the treatment, not so much the diagnosis.
What happens if you haven't been recording OSHA?
You got to go back 5 years. You regenerate. If you haven't been keeping them, you got to go back and regenerate a 5-year history. Do you get in trouble if you don't? The time something's going to pop up is if an OSHA inspector comes in. So you can play the game if the game if you want to and start recording them now. OSHA can only ask for 3. So if you got 5, there you go. If anything, I try to go back and reconstruct 3 of them. You should provide OSHA surrender logs to contractors, but the safety directors require it as part of pre-qualifications. Yeah, quote the OSHA regulation. It's right in there. You cannot submit the 300 log to anyone. That's private information with the names on there. You send them the 300A. And some research to find the rule, but it's right in there. I gave you the 1904 regulation. It's in there. You cannot release that information. That's why I emphasize that. Don't fall into that trap. That's private information. You get into a lot of trouble under medical records laws. You're releasing private information. What was the other one?
Part of the business is it reportable?
No
parking there.
If they slip in a parking lot or they slip getting out of the car, and it has nothing to do with, and it's not part of the business, it doesn't know whether they're on the job or not. If they're going on an errand for the company, they're going over to Panera to pick up stuff for the job or for the a conference or a meeting or whatever. They're on clock. They slip and fall. That's a recordable, and it's also workers' compensable.
Something snapped in his knee, goes and gets x-ray done, comes back with no meds and just says, may see no issues. No follow-up appointment made. 6 weeks later, takes the hand, they set him up for MRI sees nothing.
This is that musculoskeletal. Remember I said they're 100% subjective. There's no diagnostic tool. MRIs are diagnostic. X-rays are diagnostic. If the doctor says there's nothing discernible and it's pain, it's not OSHA recordable. There's no injury. Except possible arthritis or a pre-existing condition. The doctor's got to tell you what it is. If it doesn't know what it is, then you don't have anything. From the doctor.
There are a number of more questions, and we're just not going to have time to get to them. However, you can see that Rich's phone number and his email address is right here. I encourage you to please contact him or Rick Barton, and they would be able to answer more questions. I'm sorry that we don't have enough time. I will ask that you complete this poll, and as soon as we get the poll finished, I will pull up the HRCI and SHRM credits. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you gained some good information from this. Again, please contact Rich if you have any further questions.